Hello and welcome to another fantastic Thursday here on Viking Television. Thanks very much for joining me and Diamond for another lively evening, meeting another wonderful guest. And boy, have I got a cracker for you today. When my guest today achieved her amazing achievement, her amazing triumph, doing something so wonderful that had never been done before, her mum brought her sort of back down to earth because she said through tears of joy, "I'm crying with pride. It's wonderful, but I can't believe that little horror grew up to do this." I think that's the sort of thing that perhaps only a mother can say. My guest today is a fighter, first of all battling to achieve her own dream, and now fighting to help girls all over the world get the chance of a quality education, and so ultimately aim for their dreams too. It's more than 30 years since she became world famous, and back then she stood at the helm of her yacht alongside her exclusively female crew, waiting for the starting pistol for the toughest race on the globe. That's 32,000 miles and 9 months of life-threatening drama on the high seas. And if you look back at some of the pictures we have of those moments, makes your eyes water, actually. All eyes were, of course, on her, and her eyes were on the horizon, perhaps looking to that dream. Because no one else, thought that they would get very far because they were girls. One journalist actually called their yacht a tin full of tarts. Can't really believe it, can you? But it happened. So there we are at 1100 hours on the 2nd of September 1989, as the starter's gunshot resounded, she set off amongst the 22-strong fleet and sailed into the history books. And I can't actually think of a phrase that so neatly understates what she did. Sailing into history, it makes it sound so easy, doesn't it? But I'm sure it wasn't. She will, I am sure any minute now, tell us how much of a challenge it really was and how it became a story of survival, frankly, against all odds. And just to make the starting line was one heck of an achievement in itself. Her yacht was called Maiden and is still, some 30 years later, the focus of her life and work. They've even made a movie about them both. Let's have a look at the trailer for that movie called Maiden.
I'm Tracy Edwards, skipper of Maiden, the first all-female challenge in the Whitbread round the world race. Oh, shit. That is my smile.
They're off. The fifth Whitbread round the world yacht race is underway.
The Whitbread was the race.
I made the decision to put an all-female crew into the race.
So this was a first. Sailing in those days was very much a man's sport.
I don't see why I shouldn't be allowed to sail because I'm a girl.
We were absolutely determined.
People were scathing. Well, it was an all-woman crew.
A bunch of girls. How'd you all get on?
There's lots of Vaseline for chap lips. Waterproof mascara.
A very well-known yachting journalist referred to as a tin full of tarts.
The further we got, the nastier this stuff would get. How many times we told we couldn't do it? You're not strong enough. You're not skilled enough. You'll all die.
Some people call it the sea of certain death.
It's like hitting a brick wall every 10 seconds.
Bang! I made a couple of really stupid choices.
One mistake could mean disaster.
You're on your own. There is no hope if anything happens.
It was just something I had to do.
Gosh, that gives you a flavour of the challenge, doesn't it? So let's meet her now. Tracy Edwards, hero, yachtswoman, record breaker, trailblazer, and inspiration to generations of girls and women in countries all over the world. Tracy, welcome.
Thank you, Anne. Good to see you.
How does it feel watching any of that footage now? I know you've seen it before, but I mean, you were so young to take on such a dangerous mission. How does that make you feel now you're older and wiser?
I have to say that the first time the filmmakers got all of us together, all of the crew, first time all of us together in the same room for 27 years, we all sat and watched the film and we all looked at each other and went, what the hell were we thinking? I mean, it was just, I mean, we all have memories, of course, of the race, but they're slightly rose tinted, you know, so looking at the ferociousness of the oceans and everything else really did bring it back. And I guess what we all realised was that looking at our very young selves, you know, to look like that in swimsuits and know what we know now, was that we had very little experience of failure, you know, so at that age, it was like, oh, what's the worst that can happen? Let's just go out there and do it. It'll be fine. Of course, as you get older, your thoughts change slightly.
I mean, yes, just in that short clip of the movie there, you could see the enormous walls of water that you were facing and expected to sort of somehow get through. It must have been so frightening. But let's just talk about that. I mean, the sheer, just to get to the starting line was a mission in itself. How on earth did you actually get Maiden? Did you afford to kit her out and then pull together a crew and actually make it to that starting line?
Well, I did the 1985-86 Whitbread Round the World race as a cook for
a load of men.
For 17 men. Yeah. People say to me, why did you want to do an all-female crew? I'm like, hello. You know? So I got to the end of this 9-month race and I loved the racing and the sailing. That was fantastic. But cooking, I mean, it was just awful. So I thought, you know, I'm a navigator. I'd learned to navigate in my years before the 85-86 race. And one of the most profound thoughts of my life was at the end of that race thinking, no man will ever let me navigate on his boat in that race. So, I mean, it was quite a selfish reason that I started Maiden. You know, it didn't start out being, you know, women's lib and women's rights and everything else. It was I wanted to navigate. And I thought the only way I can do that is to put an all-female crew together. And so, much to the bemusement of my mother, I think, probably at the time, and the second person I told was King Hussein, who I'd met when I was a stewardess. And in fact, both of them said to me, you know, this is your destiny. You must do this. This is what your whole life has been leading up to. So I was like, okay. Didn't realise it was quite that important. But it really, you know, it was what I needed to make this happen. And it was hard. I mean, I thought that people would sort of titter and go, oh, girls can't do it. But it was much worse than that. It was people were so angry about the fact that we decided to do this. And you know, I remember a guy coming up to me in the pub one night I'd never seen before, and he jabbed his finger in my face. He said, you're all going to die. I'm like, oh, okay, but I think that's my business, you know. So it became very clear very quickly, this was a battle. This was going to be a battle way before we got to the start line. But in a way, you know, it was our friend. This drove us on, and every new insult and different way of telling us we weren't strong enough or smart enough and girls don't get on, where that comes from, I don't know, sort of galvanized us onto the next stage. And so in a way it helped us. But, you know, we watched for 2 years, really trying to raise the money as all these, you know, guys would get their sponsorship and their brand new shiny boats would sail into Hamble. And we'd be like, where's our boat? You know, we can't afford to design and build one. So in the end, I remortgaged my house and we bought a wreck with a pedigree. She'd already done the Whitbread and a couple of other times around the world. She arrived in Southampton on a ship, and all the girls were standing on the dock with me. And Jenny went, "Is our boat behind that one?" No, that's our boat. That's Maiden of the future. And they're like, oh, okay. So, you know, but we had to do all the work ourselves. We had to raise the funds. It was the first time anyone had ever seen a bunch of women in a shipyard. So that was another thing, you know, that people would literally, jaws would drop as we walked in, you know, on our little pink shorts. And I don't know, looking back on it now, of course, it was staggering, you know, for people. But we were, you know, why aren't people taking us seriously? But of course, the great thing really about how unique we were was that in the end there were guys within the fleet and there were boats who offered us help, you know, and they would come and they'd say, we've got an old generator. Do you? Oh, yep, we'll have that. Thank you very much. Second-hand engine. Yep, give it to us. Some old rope. Yep, you'll have those. So bit by bit, Maiden came together. But by the time we got to the start line, we'd had so many more battles than anyone else had had. So when we crossed that start line, we were battle hardened. We were about the most determined team in the entire race. So all the disadvantages became an advantage.
Ooh, that's a nice way of putting it. So talk us, we've got some shots of your crew. Would you mind introducing them to us, and where did you get them from? How did they turn up?
Well, that's Angela. I met her in a bar in Cork during Cork Racing Week, which is amazing we could remember anything from that week. But, you know, I told her what I was doing, and she said, oh, you know, I want to do that. And so we literally found these women from all over the world. There were not 12 women in the UK who had the experience. So we ended up with 9 nationalities out of 12 of us, even though it was still a British yacht. That's Claire, who lives in New Zealand now, but she's English. She was a doctor, and she learned how to do all the plumbing on the boat. She said, you know, I can deal with bodily fluids, you know, I'm sure I can deal with the plumbing. So she ended up doing the plumbing. And that's Dawn Riley, our American contingent. Dawn joined us quite late, actually, after my first mate had left. And American, confident, you know, she sort of arrived on the boat, and she became one of my watch captains, and she is awesome. She then went on to lead the first all-female America's Cup Challenge, and now she teaches kids sailing in America. Extraordinary woman.
Oh, lovely.
That's Jenny Mundy. Jenny is our success story, actually. We like to take credit for the fact that she's now managing director of Visa Europe. I personally take credit for that. She was the only one on the boat who'd been to university, so we're already, you know, in awe of Jenny. And she learned to be an electrician, and that basically set her up for every job she did for the rest of her life. She ran every cable in that boat. You know, just amazing. And also did the bow, which no one wants to do the bow. It's wet.
Yes, I see. So everybody gets a little job. Who's this?
That's Jo. Now, Jo and I met when we were 12 years old. We were school buddies. And although she didn't have the racing experience, I knew she wanted to sail around the world. So I said, look, would you come and be cook? And she went, I'm packing my bags and I'll be there. You know, she did all the filming. So all this amazing filming that you see in the film Maiden, that was Jo. And the director says that's actually what makes the film.
Oh, of course, yes. And that is?
That's Mandy, our Kiwi. So Mandy was our rigger, and totally nuts. I mean, just sometimes on a completely different planet from the rest of us. One of the nicest people I've ever met. You know, they were a great bunch. I mean, I think we had the best team in the race. Mandy now sails the Pacific, you know, sort of, yeah.
Wow. And that is?
And that's Marie-Claude. Now, Marie-Claude was my first mate. I did sack her 2 weeks before the start because
she fell out quite early on.
Massive personality clash. But having said that, she went on then to do the next Whitbread. We then ended up being best friends, and she's now looking after Maiden at the moment, actually, in Hamble. So she's still part of the Maiden team.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how stories sort of come full circle. Who's that?
I can't. Your picture is actually over the top. Let me see if I can get rid of your other. You've got 2 pictures here. Oh, so that's Michelle Paré. Michelle was a single-handed sailor. She's been a 2-handed sailor. Michelle is the only one of us who's never basically hit land for 30 years. I mean, we finished on Maiden, and she went on to her next thing. She was one of my watch captains, and when she first joined the boat, she couldn't speak a word of English. We had a lot of fun with that, I have to say. But, you know, in the end...
Especially in chaotic times when you need something done quickly.
3 years later, fluently.
And that?
Michaela von Kuskel, our Finnish crew member, the oldest member of the crew, but who then has gone on to do every other all-female project that I've ever put together. She's been my absolute rock.
Gosh, these really were friends for life then, weren't they?
Sally Creaser, Scottish. We had to say English, Welsh, Irish and Scottish, you know, we do Yeah. So Sally, sailing family, husband sails, her son now is in the America's Cup team, her other son is in the Olympics, you know, total sailing within her entire bones, with us probably the longest right from the start of the project. Tanya Visser, our Dutch crew member.
Oh, goodness, this really is an international crew, isn't it?
Absolutely, and in a way that was a huge advantage for us, because we all had different ways of doing things, and we all brought these different skill sets and you know, different styles, and we spent, you know, a year out on the water putting all of these things together and finding out which was the best way to sail the boat.
Now, you had done a previous Whitbread, as you said, as cook to those 17 men, and learning a lot along the way. But to be skipper of this new, totally exclusively female crew, were you the most experienced or probably the least experienced sailor?
I had the most ocean miles, but these were ocean miles as a stewardess. So, you know, they weren't highly regarded, let me tell you. I'm a good navigator, and I am a good navigator. For some reason, that even though I hate numbers, navigation is something I just fell in love with. It's been my total passion, you know, ever since I learned 40 years ago. Oops. And so my plan was that I would be the navigator and I would have a skipper. Well, of course, that didn't really work out very well, because I realise I'm a little bit more of a control freak than I had previously realised when I put the project together. I like things done my way. But what I also realised was I knew more than I knew. So when we started putting Maiden together, I thought, oh my God, I don't know anything. And actually, when I sat down and looked at it, I thought, yes, I do. You know, I've done this other race, I've done management, I've victualled a boat before, so, you know, I've done budgeting and everything else I kind of learned on the job, but it was really never my intention to be the skipper, as I say. But, you know, when it all kind of came to a head with Marie-Claude, I thought, well, you know, I've got to then be the person that makes the final decision. What I would say, though, was that what Marie-Claude leaving did was it made us a much more female hierarchical team, because what I'd done without realizing it was I built a team on male structure, because that's all I knew, that's all there was, you know, this very linear, you know, thing of power and control. When we removed Marie-Claude, we became, you know, myself as a navigator and two watch captains, a sort of triangle with two watches, with a much more involved decision-making process, which works much better for women. So it ended up being perfect.
Clearly did for you too. So there you are on the voyage, managing leg by leg, and you actually won 2 legs as well. I mean, that was an extraordinary moment. But what about the worst? There must have been really frightening moments. I mean, I gather there were icebergs and the temperatures dropped to 30 below or something, a frostbite, and at one point satellite signal failure and no food for several days.
Yeah, we kind of went through it all. So you know, you are prepared. You've done we did, you know, the amount of training we did. I'd already done the race. No one else had, but, you know, I did tell them. They say that I didn't tell them, but I'm pretty sure I told them it's going to be horrible and cold and wet in the Southern Ocean. There would be icebergs and storms. But you are sort of prepared to a level. You know you've got a good boat. You've built it yourself. You know you've got a good crew. You've been training. You've reduced the element of luck to the tiniest particle that you can possibly reduce it to, and so when you set out, you're pretty much prepared. And remember as well that so the first leg is a real warm up. You know, you go through the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic, and it's a real chance to get to know the boat and stretch your legs and kind of understand the way that the crew works. By the time you go into the Southern Ocean, and that was the longest leg ever in any Whitbread, because of course there were sanctions in South Africa and we couldn't call into South Africa, so we had to go from South America right through the Southern Ocean to Australia, which is 7,800 miles, 6 weeks at sea, and the furthest south that anyone had ever been. So there were a number of icebergs. The first 2 we didn't see on the radar before we saw them. That was probably for me the scariest point, because then after that it was hot luck. You know, are they going to show up on the radar? We don't know. So you're taking what you feel are calculated risks. I mean, I do look back at them and think they weren't that calculated, but but you're so wrapped up in what you're doing and where you're going and how much you want to win. And remember, there are 23 other boats in the fleet, so you've got people are maybe a few hundred miles away, or even if it's 1,000 or 50. And yet the rule at sea is if someone else is in trouble, you go and help them. So there is an element of that. Of course, someone did die on the second leg.
That must have been terribly depressing news, apart from anything else. But obviously you felt it personally. But yeah, you had that message while you were sailing, didn't you?
We did, and we knew that 2 guys had gone over on Crichtons and they managed to recover them. But Claire, the doctor, who spent 2 days on the radio sitting in my seat in the nav station, was only saving one, Bart Vanden Dwee, from hypothermia. Anthony Phillips died, which was, just awful and shocking for us, his friends and family, but a real wake-up call. It's a real... You are not immortal. This is a dangerous place. Don't take your eye off the ball, and the clipping on when you go up on deck and all of the things that, I know a couple of the girls thought I was a bit of an old maid sometimes. They'd, make sure you clip on. I don't want you going over the side, and then when that happened, they were like, right, okay, you clip on. Yeah. So, it's a real reality check, but we won the second leg coming into Australia, which was, it's hard to imagine now how jaw-dropping that was, and of course everyone thought it was a fluke. And then the next leg, which was
you did it again, exactly.
Again, the next leg.
That brilliant? Yes, some of the men actually wrote off your first win as just a luck. Beginner's luck even, but they couldn't say that when you won the next leg. There was one moment, wasn't there, when you were very near the Falkland Islands, where you almost had to declare a mayday, and didn't the RAF or somebody scramble a Hercules to be ready to rescue you if you needed it?
Yeah, so I'd mucked up coming up to Cape Horn, which still wakes me up at 2 o'clock in the morning kicking myself. But we were not in a great position. We had lost miles. But once we'd come up round Cape Horn, which is quite benign, actually, surprisingly, as we came up round Cape Horn, we came round the corner to this amazing low pressure sort of right in our path. And we just started bashing into the waves. But even so, we thought, well, we can still make up some miles here. We're a heavy boat. We have that advantage on this leg. And then we started taking on water. We didn't know where it was from. So, yeah, we did call that. We were right next to the Falkland Islands. We just called them up and we said, look, we're just giving you a heads up. There may be a mayday. We hope not. But they did fly an RAF Hercules over the top of us just to sort of see how we were doing. And they stood on standby 24 hours a day until we went past and got to Uruguay.
Yeah, and I know there was one point you said that you still have sleepless nights over it. There was one time when you were very depressed and very upset with your performance, I guess, and the sort of crisis that you were facing. And your childhood friend, was it Jo? You said she says in the movie that she was really worried about you at one point. There was one point where you weren't even going to bed to sleep. You were just sleeping in your captain's chair, and she was particularly worried about you.
Yeah, this is when I really learned about a side of my character that I had previously not realised existed. I didn't realise quite how competitive I was and how completely single-tracked mind I can be. I mean, I guess I had to be to get to the boat to the start, but I never really thought about it like that. It was really only when we were going through, when we would lose just a mile to another boat. I mean, I would, torture myself, and this incredible focus, goodness knows where it comes from, would sort of kick in. And Jo in the end had to say to me, you're no good to us if you don't reach the end in one piece. You have got to sleep and you've got to eat and you've got to just forget about it, for a few minutes every day. You've got 11 great people here who are, fighting this. It's not just your battle. And she was always, the nav station was here and the galley was there, and she would often just lean over and go, isn't it time we were going to bed or having something to eat? So she did, but we all looked after each other. I mean, this is the greatest crew I've ever sailed with, ever. And, that sense of camaraderie and looking after each other was just extraordinary.
Tell me the story of the swimsuit shot, because I know that it was after one, I don't know if it was the same, depressingly bad leg. You were thinking about how you, as Maiden, as the crew, were going to be seen to arrive. And you thought it through and came up with this idea. Tell me about it.
Well, every press conference at the end of every leg, whether we'd won or lost or whatever, we would never get asked serious questions. It would always be, you know, did you get on, and you know, and how was this, and how you're dressed and everything else. And we thought, well, we're just going to play people at their own game. So we're going to look fabulous and wear these swimsuits. And, you know, if people are going to talk about how we look, this is going to be on our terms. And we didn't realise quite what an important point this was going to be later on, because over the last 30 years, and we discussed this actually at the screening, all of us, when we saw the swimsuit shot on film, you know, we all kind of cringed a bit. And I said to the crew, I've battled with this for years, you know, did we let feminists down? You know, did we, you know, was this something awful? And it was actually my daughter, who was 18 at the time, and she said to me, Mum, you are always going on at me about, you know, women shouldn't be told what they can wear. And you'd won 2 legs. You look amazing. You'd earned the right to wear whatever you liked. So she said, so I think you've got to come to terms with the fact that it was just a great piece of PR. And, you know, you look like Amazons. And, you know, yeah. That's when we came to terms with it.
I mean, you did. You looked absolutely fabulous. All of you looked wonderful. But it did the trick as well, even though you might have felt it almost did it too well. It stopped the press talking about you coming in after a bad leg and having performed badly, and immediately refocused them onto the wow factor. And why not? You looked absolutely brilliant. And you were an amazing bunch of people doing the most extraordinary teamwork. Why shouldn't you look like women as well?
Well, exactly. And I mean, I think now that point is well made, and well made by young women. I'm always so impressed with the way young women always say to me, we love that shot. That says everything about women we want to say. We can wear what we like. We're strong, we're powerful. And I love that.
Yeah, it's girl power, actually, isn't it? It really was. But even after that, and it was seen as such a success, your arrival there, you say you went back to the hotel and just cried all night.
Yeah, well, you know, we hadn't won the leg and we'd lost first place. We'd slipped into second. We'd been leading, you know, most of the way around the world, and I was absolutely gutted. The pressure, of course, when you're an underdog, there's no pressure. When everyone thinks you're going to die or not get to the finishing line, that's easy. But when you've won a few legs, and you know, that's when the pressure gets on. And so I could never let up on myself. It is a trait that's underlying in me. I have to battle it sometimes, and I have people around me who'll go to me, you know, what's this? Oh, I may take a weekend off. You're not that indispensable. You know, you've got a team here. So it is that pulling myself up and reminding myself that, you know, I do have to be, you know, healthy physically and mentally to be able to take on the next challenge.
And my goodness, when you arrived eventually back at Southampton, I think when you were actually sort of coming in, knowing that you were nearing the end, you saw several other boats come out, and you thought they were just going out. And actually what they did was turn around and they wanted to sort of escort you in. And that's when you first started to realise, hey, what have we actually achieved here?
Absolutely. So we saw the Needles just at dawn, at sunrise. Perfect. I mean, no wind, which was not perfect. We knew Ruckanore, we could see them just up ahead of us. So, you know, you always put your foot to the pedal a little bit more when you can see another boat. But we knew we were coming home. We knew we couldn't make up into first place, but we knew we were probably second overall, which was great. And Howard, the scamp, had said to us, oh, you know, everyone waited all bank holiday weekend, but you didn't arrive. You know, we ran out of wind, we ran out of food. I mean, we crawled to that finishing line. He said everyone's gone home. So we were like, oh, okay, well, you know, that's fine. We knew our friends and family would be there. And he, you know, he was totally having us on. So we saw one boat and then another boat, and they turned round and started going with us, and we sort of looked at them. And by the time we got, sort of up the Solent, there were 600 boats on the water. I mean, you couldn't see the Solent. It was just awash. Speedboats, sailing yachts. It was just extraordinary. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And the noise when we crossed the finishing line, all the horns going off, all the ships in Southampton dock, they'd arranged for all the horns to, it was just, and that's when we thought, oh, people did notice. Okay, we might have done something here. So
after so many months out at sea, sort of isolated from that world, suddenly you were brought home to what you had actually done and what it meant to other people.
It was amazing, and this usual British Reserve. I mean, where had that gone? Someone had just sort of chucked that away, and we came around the corner into Ocean Village, and there's 50,000 people on the dock, and I'm thinking, oh, if ever I crash the boat parking it, it's going to be now, isn't it? Yeah. So all I can think of is, please don't let me crash the boat. Please don't let me crash the boat, because that'll be the photograph. And then all these people, they're playing Tina Turner, Simply the Best, on speakers. And everyone's chanting, Maiden, Maiden. And we're just like rabbits in the headlight when you see the footage. And so we pull up and, we do all the champagne and everything else. And then we were supposed to walk from Maiden to the Royal Southampton Yacht Club, which is about a 7 to 10 minute walk. It took us nearly 2 hours. Right. And people were just reaching for us. They wanted to shake our hands and touch us and take photographs. They were giving us roses, and it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life.
And I know you said at the very beginning that you sort of found yourself doing it because selfishly you wanted to do it. You wanted to skipper, or at least be a really important, relevant part of a crew. And that's why you put it all together. But when you arrived back at Southampton and the realization of what you had achieved hit home, did you feel that maybe you weren't doing it just for yourself? You were actually doing it for women everywhere.
Yeah, I think we kind of steered clear of the word feminism at the sort of the beginning of the project. But I remember very clearly when we got to New Zealand and we'd won our second leg and we were leading by 18 hours at the halfway stage, and we were still getting questions about, do you still get on? And, and did anyone break a nail and all this stuff? And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is worse than I thought, and I remember very clearly thinking then, if feminism means equality and fairness, count me in. I'm definitely a feminist. And so when we got to the end of the race, I think we'd all come to terms with the fact that this isn't just about us. Maiden, yeah, okay, Maiden's Maiden, this is huge, and it wasn't just about women, it was about men who were told they couldn't do something and saying, well, if they can do that, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So yeah, by the end of the race, I was very determined that probably the rest of my life, in some part, was going to be focused on women's rights and what I could do to help other women do, whatever they wanted to do.
And it really has been. How did you take to fame? Because you did become instantly famous. You were given an MBE. You were given Yachtsman of the Year. I mean, you weren't even a yachtswoman. You were a Yachtsman of the Year. And you wrote a book, of course, which was top of the Times bestseller list for some 16 weeks. How did you take to fame?
Not very well. And this is something that for probably 27, 28 years I didn't really talk about, but I fell off the edge of a cliff really at the end of Maiden. Well, I got from May, when the finish was, to September, and everything. September was crazy. I got married wrongly, as we both agreed a few months later. We both changed so much during the race, and the book had come out, and This Is Your Life with Michael Aspel. That was surreal. So all these amazing things were happening. And then everyone left. The girls had gone to do, their next races, their next jobs. The fleet had left, the village quietened down. And I suddenly looked around me and I thought, I can't do this on my own. Where are my team? And I had a nervous breakdown. And it was pretty severe, and Joe came to the rescue drove all night from Wales one night, literally came and packed my bag, threw me in the car and took me back down to Wales, where I spent 2 years as a recluse. So yeah, I did not deal with it very well, but I'm pleased that now I'm talking about it, because so many sportsmen and women have said to me, I had the same thing. 1 minute I was up there, and then the next minute I was like, well, where's everyone gone? And I think it's really important that we talk about this stuff, because I think sometimes people look at me and they think, well, she's so strong, she's so determined, she never gives up. Well, yeah, but I'm also human, and with all the frailties that go with that.
I think, yes, mental health problems in the sporting world is only just beginning to become something that a lot of people, I mean, even your most macho footballers are talking about, because I guess the sort of personality you have to be that accomplished, the sort of self-discipline you put yourself through, the drive you have, isn't always very difficult, isn't always very easy for you to exist as a human being, is it? It's complex, obviously. And there you are, it happened to you.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's hardest for the people around you. I realised that by not speaking out and asking for help, I'd also punished, my close friends and my family, because I didn't know what to do. And I think for me, that was the biggest lesson of one of the biggest lessons of my life, is to ask for help, not just to satisfy your need for help, but to help the people around you who are so desperate to do something, but they just don't know what to do.
Yes, I mean, you went through some hard times after that, but still, I think you say that it's how you deal with failure that dictates who you are.
I think it's the most important part of who we are. I have to say, I think probably none of us really celebrate success as much as we should do. I think especially in sport as well, and well, probably in all walks of life, we look at failure and we get the microscope out and we look at that and we go, now what went wrong and how can we change it and everything else. And sometimes we forget to look at success and go, well, how did we do that? Let's take that apart. That's going to be fun to do that. So yeah, I think what I have realized is, yes, I have learned to enjoy success. And you still go through when you've got your failures, you have to pick it apart and what went wrong and how can I change that and everything else. But it's learning resilience, and with everything that's happening now in this lockdown, I didn't know I'd spent 30 years learning resilience, but that's apparently what I've been doing, because every failure has taught me something about how to get back up, how to cope with it, and what to do with it. And learning all of those things, don't sweat the small stuff. Categorize things. Can I change that? No. Well, then put it to one side. How does it affect this? Can I change this? Yeah, okay, well, let's concentrate on that. So learning all of these things, that all comes from failure.
It's interesting because even in your own blurb, you describe yourself as a school dropout with a dream. What sort of a youngster were you? Were you that difficult?
I was a horrible, horrible teenager. I am so glad my daughter does not take after me. My father died when I was 10, and up until that point, I lived a very happy upper middle class life in Berkshire with my wonderful family. When my father died, my mother unfortunately remarried, and he was not a particularly nice man, and we did not get on very well. We had quite a violent relationship. And at the same time, we moved down to Wales, so new set of friends, actually where I met Joe. I was bullied very badly in school. I was beaten up a few times, and so stopped going to school, stopped talking to my mother, started, sort of climbing out of my bedroom window at 11 o'clock at night and going drinking. I stole a car. I was arrested. My mother. We see now why my mother in the film is saying, I can't believe that little horror grew up to do this, because what she went through, God bless her. I never, until I have my own daughter, and of course, until we have our own children, we don't realise that, that we will never love our parents as much as they love us. It's impossible. So knowing that, I just kept apologising to my mother every single day when I had my daughter. Mum, I'm so sorry for the teenage years. She's like, it's fine. So no, I became this monster. Angry and aggressive, wouldn't ask for help, violent, then, you know, I turned into a bit of a bully. So it was all a horrible mess. And it was my mum and this incredible strength and her incredible spirit. And she said to me, I think you need to go traveling, you know, go backpacking. You know, we've got a friend in Greece, he's got a bar there, you know, backpack down there and then go and work down there. Now, at the age of 16, that is so brave. But she knew I needed to be somewhere else. And thank God it ended up the way that it did.
Well, I know. I mean, you toddle off to Greece or backpack there, and find yourself doing, as you were saying, stewardessing on various yachts for people. And you bumped into King Hussein. How did that happen?
One of those amazing things, and you know, we all have parts of our lives where if we've gone one way, sliding doors, you know, one way this would have happened, one way or the other. I was in Newport, Rhode Island. I was 21, I guess, at the time. Had no work. I was always on the scrounge. Used to sleep on people's floors. Never had any money to buy food. And this friend of mine called me up literally 4 o'clock one morning at the house I was staying at. And he said, I've got this job, stewardess. You've got to be down at the boat in a couple of hours. We've got to leave to go to Martha's Vineyard to pick up this secret person, very important. And I nearly told him where to go and put the phone down, but something made me go, yeah, actually, no, you need money. So off I went. And the charter turned out to be King Hussein of Jordan and his wife, Queen Noor, and some of the other rest of the family. And we just hit it off. And I know people think, what? That sounds a bit weird. But King Hussein was a collector of people. He was one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met in my life. And wow, we could really do with him as a leader right now. But he had this, just this common touch about him. And so after lunch, we were down in the galley and I'm washing up. And I sensed this sort of presence beside me, and then someone picked up a tea towel, and I turned around and it was King Hussein, and he started drying up, and I went, you can't do that. He said, I can do anything I like, I'm king. And I went, okay. And then we just started chatting, and he said, I'm fascinated with this life that you live. You know, you're like a Bedouin, which is a huge compliment, of course, when you know what it was. I didn't at the time. We also had an interest in communication, radios. We both enjoyed taking mechanics things apart and putting them back together again. I do sound like I need to get out more. I realise that. And we loved navigation. He's a flyer and I was a sailor, so we had so much in common. He was a ham radio operator, of course. And so when I got back to the UK, when I called my mum, she said, some bloke calling himself King Hussein of Jordan has called asking if you'd like to go up to London for lunch. I went, oh, that is, please tell me you didn't say anything awful. So she went, no, knowing you, I thought it might be. So, and we were friends then until he died in 1999. And he was always at the end of a phone if I ever needed to.
Such a great support of the whole Maiden project. Wasn't he? I mean, like you say, he changed your life, and what a wonderful meeting that is. Tell me about the Maiden project, because, well, first of all, you sold Maiden after the Whitbread race, and it was only years later that you learned that it was sort of it was rotting away somewhere, and you thought of rescuing it, bringing it back, and then doing something with it.
Yeah, I had to sell Maiden literally the day after the race finished. I mean, so one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever had to do. I mean, we'd all developed a very close relationship, and also with her. I mean, she was the 13th crew member, but we had no money. We never had any money. And I wanted to pay all the girls a bonus, so off she went. I mean, I couldn't watch her go. A male crew actually picked her up and took her to Holland to sell her. And over the years, you know, I did other all-female crews and a mixed gender team and various other things. I would, every so often I'd hear about her, a bit sadder, a bit older, not loved as much as we did. And then in 2015, I heard that she had been dumped in the Seychelles, and no lady likes to be dumped in the Seychelles. It just seemed so ignominious. So I called all the original crew and I said, we've got to rescue her. We can't leave her there. And they went, yeah, absolutely. So we did a big crowdfunder, raised the money to buy her again. And just at that time, I went to Jordan to do a talk at the Dead Sea. Total coincidence. They did something in the press about me rescuing Maiden. I got home, had a phone call one night from the United Arab Emirates, picked up the phone thinking it was a friend of mine, and this voice said, "Hello, I hear you've rescued Dad's boat." And I went, "Who's this?" She said, "It's Princess Haya." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." Hadn't seen her since
King Hussein's daughter.
King Hussein's daughter. Hadn't seen her since she was 12 years old. She said, "How can I help?" She said, "Dad will rise up and strike me if I don't do something to help this project." So we shipped her back to the UK. Princess Haya very generously funded the shipping, the restoration. We did this 1.5-year restoration. She was in a terrible, terrible state. And then as all this was going on, we were sort of like, well, what are we going to do with her? You know, don't want her to go to a museum, sailing school, no. And she said, well, Maiden empowered me when I was 12. You know, I still remember you crossing the finishing line. She said, imagine what we could do with young women today. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. And she said, and girls' education, because I was patron of a number of girls' educational charities. So she said, there's something here, you know. She said, I see Maiden is a visual, hands around the world, women helping girls, education, opportunity. So the Maiden Factor was born, the Maiden Factor Foundation. And in November 2018, at the exact, almost the exact day the film came out, Maiden left on a 3-year world tour to raise funds and awareness for girls' education. And we got until March, obviously, and we had to,
yes,
as is everyone else, you know, in the world, we had to put the project on hold for a bit.
Well, I tell you what, we've got a promotional video for the Maiden Factor project. So that will actually tell everybody more or less about the work that you are doing and are aiming to do and want to continue doing once you can get traveling again. So let's have a look at the Maiden Factor project promotional video.
Out here, you're meeting people, you're like bringing this like boat to everybody, to the world. It's unbelievable. It's like the coolest thing that I've ever seen.
I love the slogan, if you educate a girl, you can change the world. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so UNESCO and the Global Fund for Global Development and various other organisations have done studies over the years about the impact of educating girls. And if we look at the fact that there's 130 million girls around the world currently without access to an education, and that's probably a low number, if you also add to that after COVID-19, the group of girls, the group of children least likely to return to education are disadvantaged girls and girls in poverty. Now, what happens if you educate a girl, if you give a girl 12 years, quality years of education, is that if every girl was educated, we could eradicate poverty. We could stop the spread of AIDS. In fact, we could stop the spread of most viruses, which it seems to be pretty relevant today. We would reduce infant mortality rates by 49%. We would reduce child marriages. We would reduce female genital mutilation. If you educate a girl, you educate not just her, you educate her family, her community, her village, her country. You increase the socio-economic status of every human being around her. So this is not, sort of just it's a great strapline, but, the facts and figures prove. And if you just look at it from, if you don't want to be soft, and fluffy about, giving girls and life opportunity and a chance, you look at it in bare economics. If we educate 50% of the world's population, we can solve most of the problems we have.
And that's the whole focus of your project. Right, let's get on to some questions. We have Jerry in Newark. Fantastic show of perseverance over all challenges. What was the most difficult challenge during Whitbread? Emotional, physical, technical, etc.?
Oh, that's the first time I've ever had that question. And I rarely get questions I've never heard before. Everything's difficult. I would say the technical side of the boat was sometimes the thing that we had least control over. So, the engine would break, or there'd be salt water in the generator, or the tanks would flood or something like that. And you have to deal with these things at sea. Those are the most stressful things, because everything else you were kind of expecting. You were expecting the bad weather, the cold, the frostbite, the hunger, the big seas, the seasickness, the icebergs. But the stuff and the real life and death stuff, if you can't make fresh water, you die. So the technical things, I think, were probably the things that weighed upon us the most.
Yes, well, as you say, you have to be practical before you can be anything else. Spencer from Boca Raton says, I watched your film, Maiden, and really enjoyed it. Well done for what you've accomplished and overcome. There are many young people out there who will be coming out of this pandemic a bit lost. What would be your advice to them to make the most of themselves as adults?
That's a good question, and I do give a lot of talks to schools, and one thing I always say to young people is there is no right or wrong way to live your life. My daughter hasn't gone to university. She works for me, actually. She runs our events on Maiden. Well, not now, but some of her friends go to university. There's no one right way to get from A to B. Life is messy. And what we're learning now, of course, during this is that those of us who are most adaptable to change, are going to be the ones that get through this. And one of my favourite quotes in the world is Sir Charles Darwin. It is not the fittest nor the most intelligent of the species which survives, but those most adaptable to change. So what I would say is that if we can be relaxed about how we come out of this and not say everything has to, I haven't done this and therefore I've missed that, then that's not going to happen, and this. We're so regimented, I think, with young people, A-levels and university. I always say to young people, there are two certainties in life. If you stand still, nothing will happen. That's a certainty. Nothing's going to come to you. If you move forwards, and it doesn't matter if you don't know which direction you're going in, if you have no idea which path you're on, something will happen. An opportunity will present itself, and you may then go, oh, I'm going in the wrong direction, but you'll be halfway to where you're going. So I always say to young people, keep moving forwards.
My old boss used to say, never turn down an adventure. And that could be your motto for you as well, couldn't it? Right, Donnie from Solvang says, are there other professions today that you would say are similarly male dominated, with opportunities for women to show they can do it as well, if not better, like you did with the Whitbread? He said, by the way, I saw the documentary and absolutely love it, and I've recommended it to everybody I know. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's hard to find something that's not male dominated, if I'm honest. Some areas of No, I'm really struggling.
Yeah, me too. I can't think of one really. There's so much more work for you to do then, isn't there?
Exactly, and the same, with you in media, and sort of. So we find ourselves at various levels, but the people at the top, the people making the decisions, the people sitting on the boards, they're all still mostly men. And you look at what's happening in a lot of countries in the world, and you look at. I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but sort of white middle-aged males still having this dominance over banking, business, media, publishing, sport. You name it. And yes, we're changing things slowly. I guess what has changed over the last 30 years that I've noticed is that at least men are part of the discussion. 30 years ago, we were talking, to our hands or into a mirror. I think what gives me hope and optimism now is how many men I hear saying, this isn't right. We've got to change this. And so, hallelujah, we will get there, but we've got a long way to go.
Renee from San Bruno in California says, are you competitively involved in sailing today?
No, I've got a back injury which prevents me from competing. And when Maiden did leave the UK in November 2018, I did have a little tear as I watched her sail off, and the crew keeps saying, when are you going to come sailing? But for me, I don't want to try and recreate Maiden. She's theirs now. She's, my time's then, and I love running the project for them. I love raising the money. I love organising the stopovers for them. So I live vicariously through them, and they have allowed me to go to a couple of stops. I was allowed to go to LA, which was great.
Yeah. When did you last travel, and when do you hope to travel again?
Well, I flew back from New York at the end of February, and I guess we all might be having this experience. How much we've always taken for granted, the tiny little things in our lives that we've taken for granted, going to the pub for a pint, walking into a shop without a mask, all of these different things. I remember getting off the plane from New York and getting home and going, oh my God, I'm so sick of airports and airplanes, and and now I would give anything to be standing in a 4-hour queue at immigration going into JFK airport. Seriously.
I know, isn't it crazy? We have to rethink so much, don't we? You've been talking about your daughter a lot. We've got a couple of lovely pictures that it would be nice to show everybody, because as you say, she's all grown up now. There she is, little, and now she's all grown up and doing her own thing.
Yeah.
You're proud of the achievement of all, wouldn't you say?
She's we're so far apart in personalities. She's really well behaved. She's gentle, she's kind, she has a quietness about her that I do not have. She is incredibly strong, but she's very quiet about it. And when she said she didn't want to go to university, and I said to her, well, then you're going to have to go and get a job, aren't you? Because there's rent, there's food, and I'm not paying for it if you're not going to university. So she went, I was hoping I might be able to apply for a job with you, like, meaning me. And I thought, that's brave. So she worked for our head of events for a year, and until the head of events left, and then she upgraded, and she's been amazing.
Wow, that's lovely, actually, isn't it? It must be lovely for you to work together, and everything, and share that project as well. Share all of its hopes and dreams. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for giving me your time, giving us all your time.
Thank you so much, Anne.
It really has been, and the film Maiden, it's a film documentary, is absolutely stonkingly good. It really is. It's funny because your crew members, when you were making it and reshooting little bits and pieces for it, didn't they sort of ring you up and say, now, are we doing a PR thing and saying how wonderful we all were together, and that everything went smoothly and that it was all, rose tinted, or shall we tell the truth this time? And what did you say to them?
They did all separately call me and say, how truthful are we going to be? And I went, let's do it. I mean, I knew what they meant. They meant me. So, let's do it, warts and all, because if girls keep being told that they have to look perfect while they're being perfect and everything's perfect, life is not a reality for them. So let's show them how messy it can be. And we did.
Even if there's a clash of characters, you've got to make it work if you're a team. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I watched it this morning because I was able to access it on Amazon Prime. That's here in the UK. I don't know if that's true of elsewhere in the world, but apparently if people go to Maiden.film, that's where you will find out where you can view it in your part of the world.
Yeah.
Maiden.film, that's how to see it. Like I said, it is brilliant, and everybody who's been coming in with questions say how much they've enjoyed it too. So thank you so much for your time today, and best of luck with the Maiden project when you can get up and running properly again, as we all can very soon. Lovely to be with you.
Thanks.
Oh, wasn't that wonderful? And next week my guest is Dr. Princess Stephanie Lowenstein-Wertheim-Rosenberg. I think I've said that properly. She's actually a godmother to one of Viking's river ships, the Viking Hild. And if you have ever been on that particular cruise, you'll have sailed past her family-owned and beautifully top-rated winery or vineyard in Lower Franconia. Along with her father-in-law, Princess Stephanie runs the family's ancestral home that was built in 1725. Viking longships on the main river sail past Schloss Lowenstein, and guests are able to tour the estate and the winery, and apparently it's fantastic. So make an appointment to view with me and Diamond here on Viking.TV next Thursday, and maybe we should all pour a glass of lovely crisp cold wine and then see what Dr. Princess Stephanie has to tell us. That should be absolutely fantastic. So from me, look, have a really happy and safe week until then. And I'll tell you what, shall I leave you now with another look at Tracy Edwards' amazing journey on the film Maiden. And I hope you get to see it and get to enjoy it. So here it is now. Here's the promotional video for it. You'll be able to see the whole thing from wherever else you are in the world, if you can find out by going to maiden.film. Let's have a look again at the trailer now.
I'm Tracy Edwards, skipper of Maiden, the first all-female challenge in the Whitbread round the world race. Oh, that is my smile.
They're off. The 5th Whitbread round the world yacht race is underway.
The Whitbread was the race.
I made the decision to put an all-female crew into the race.
So this was the first. Sailing in those days was very much a man's sport.
I don't see why I shouldn't be allowed to sail because I'm a girl.
We were absolutely determined.
People were scathing.
Well, it was an all-woman crew.
A bunch of girls. How'd you all get on?
There's lots of Vaseline for chap lips, waterproof mascara.
A very well-known yachting journalist referred to as a tin full of tarts.
The further we got, the nastier this stuff would get. How many times were told we couldn't do it? You're not strong enough. You're not skilled enough. You'll all die.
Some people call it the sea of certain death.
It's like hitting a brick wall every 10 seconds. Bang! I made a couple of really stupid choices.
One mistake could mean disaster.
You're on your own. There is no hope if anything happens. It was just something I had to do.